ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. It's a really great honor for me to open this section of the conference, and generally for all of us who live in Ukraine, it's a great honor to welcome and to host this, to welcome you and host this International Democratic Education Conference. And I'm Lithuanian myself, but I have devoted last 4 years of my life to this country and a lot of energy, and in this sense I share the pleasure and privilege to welcome you all those who are coming from other countries. And I believe this conference is a sign that we are making another step toward more democratic society, and it's a really big thing. I'm impressed with the growth of new alternative and democratic schools in Ukraine, and this is a very good sign. So welcome to this presentation. I'll start from a little comment regarding the name of my presentation, because the way it was printed in those materials, don't look at them. It's slightly wrong. We're a bit lost in translation. The more or less correct way to say it is growing up of adults, and I mean it, growing up of adults, as a launch pad for children, or as a starting position for children. So sorry for this little miscommunication, and I'm really surprised how many of you have gathered here in this hall, despite of that little problem. Yeah, so I'm also thinking that probably all other halls are either smaller or they're not really comfortable. So great. Let me tell a few words about myself. I'm Vytas, the short version of my name. Denis already told those formalities. I'm mainly working with business leaders, and what I do, I help them grow, become more self-aware, and as a result more effective as leaders. Directly I am not coming from the field of children's education, other than the fact that I'm the father of 6. So I have some relation with education and some contact with schools and teachers and principals. My background, I'm a banker. I spent 20 years as a banker working in different international financial institutions, in most of that time in top management positions, and I got really interested in the topic of leadership, in the topic of management in general, how leaders, the million-dollar question, how leaders are born or made. Yeah, so I've been living with this question for many years, and then I got interested in the field of developmental psychology, and basically this presentation is more or less around the field of developmental psychology. And with some time, this interest of mine grew to the extent that it pushed out my main profession. So I decided to become a coach, trainer, consultant, instead of being a solid banker and top manager. So, and still questioning myself, was it just a middle life crisis, or was it a conscious decision, how it happens. So my professional kind of trademark can be summarized in this short sentence: upgrade of leaders' operating system. So basically what I'm going to talk about is what is an operating system of a human being, of a person, and why is it important in the context of leadership and in the context of growing children in many different ways. And I want to start from the question, are we grown up enough? And I want you to spend like a few seconds with this question and think about your environments and your countries, your communities, up probably to the level of like the leaders who are running countries and so on. are we grown up enough? Yeah, so most of you coming from the field of education, you probably know the Jean Piaget theory of cognitive development, yeah, and those stages like sensory motor and then pre-operational, concrete operational, formal operational, and we all know how children develop through certain stages. Yeah, this is not a secret. The next question is, does the story end here? Yeah, does the development end here? And does anyone becoming adult in terms of physical and biological kind of adulthood become really adult in terms of the level of consciousness and the mind complexity? And I think this question itself deserves some attention and putting into context of education. So my proof is, if you look at some of these world leaders and come back to the previous question, are we grown up enough? And is it enough? Those people who are running countries, who start wars, are these people really adult? Not in terms of their physical bodies, but in terms of their consciousness. And I'm using the words growing up in terms of, instead of, for example, adult development, because really I mean it, grown-ups. Yeah, so my question is, what is the role for us adults in the upbringing and in the development of children? And what role does our own adulthood play in this whole topic? So there are many ways to look at this. I will base my presentations basically on two theories that are very, very interconnected. Basically, they are speaking about the same thing from a bit different angles. And one is called the ego development theory, which has been started and developed by Jane Loevinger, who has passed away many years ago, and then her student Susanne Kugreuter, who is one of my teachers, and then other scholars were William Torber, Terry O'Fallon, and some others who are developing the ego development theory. Another theory widely known is subject-object theory, developed by Dr. Robert Gigan from Harvard. Both Robert Gigan and Susanne Kugreuter are coming from Harvard. And basically, both of those theories explain in which stages do the adult people develop and continue developing. So the background for this, by the way, just a quick recommendation if you're interested to go deeper. There are many good articles on this subject. One of the most popular is 7 Transformations of Leadership, which is one of the must-reads on the topic of leadership of all times in Harvard Business Review. So you can find it on open sources. It's circulating. So basically, what's the story behind? Probably by the 60s of the last century, it was kind of a common opinion was that once a person grows up physically or biologically, approximately to the age of 20, then the consciousness, or in other terms, mind complexity, also stops growing. And then what is happening? Only like accumulation of knowledge, basically data, memory, experience as such, but the level of consciousness stays kind of static or stable. Then with the development, post-Piagetian development of developmental psychology, and part of it is constructive psychology, all those scholars came to the conclusion that anyone at different stages can be within quite a wide range of different levels of consciousness or mind complexity. And even someone in their 30s can have like more developed operating system, so to say, that someone, for example, 60 years of age. And this is already quite well proven. This knowledge is widely used in leadership development, mostly in corporations. I don't know how much it is approaching the field of children's education. So what those scholars did, they distinguished two different types of development. For the simplicity, they call them like horizontal development. So horizontal development is what we typically perceive as development, which is new knowledge, new skills, new techniques. We read another book, we go to another training, and then we expand our kind of horizontal capacity. Basically, we have the toolbox and more tools in this toolbox. And another type of development is vertical development. So basically, vertical development is when our toolbox itself expands, so that finally we can put even more tools into this. To be more precise, vertical development is when the ways we see the world changes, basically the ways we perceive the world. These are different stages of meaning making, the way we perceive and make meaning of the same things. People being at different stages of development see totally different meanings. Then different ways we translate our thoughts and ideas into actions. Otherwise, these stages are also called action logics. We can metaphorically call them different maps of reality. The later the stage, by the way, and those stages are not called kind of lower and higher. These are earlier and later, and this is a very important kind of distinction. The later the stage, the more precise and more detailed the map of reality is. And also metaphorically, we can call this that the upgrade of a person's operating system is happening. Yeah, you know, if you remember computers like in 90s or later, so not only interfaces and not only the way we visually perceive it, but the capacity, the ability of those operating systems, their capacity to run really heavy and complex software changes. So the same is happening with these stages of development. Some of the, I will go very quickly through and superficially, by the way, to put this topic into, 1 hour's presentation is a challenge. So I'll run very quickly through some of the stages, but before I do that, I want to give you some of the flavor of what else changes when people develop through these stages. So one of the first things is perspectives, the number of perspectives a person can perceive and take and see things from, basically. So the earlier the stage, the fewer the perspective. We usually start from the first-person perspective when a child cannot see anything through the eyes of another person. Then second-person perspective, only through our own group. Then the third-person perspective, when we can see ourselves through the eyes of anyone. And then the fourth and fifth, basically what is happening, the subject-object move helps a person see themselves and the systems and multiple systems that they're part of. Another thing, important thing that is changing is, other than self-awareness in general, because self-awareness expands, the perception of time. Very, very interesting thing. The earlier the stage, the shorter the time perspective. So what bothers me, how I survive today, or what will happen in 100 of years or even more. So the later the stage, the more, in other words, the more mature a person is, the longer is the horizon kind of concern. And those most mature people, they are not working for themselves or for their own children, but for generations of their grandchildren. Another interesting thing is the way a person perceives power, authority, and freedom. Yeah, the lower the stage, the more direct and more kind of suppressive is the way you can express power. And the later the stage, the power and authority it's kind of as it's dissolved. You don't even notice it, but the leadership becomes very profound and very powerful. These are basically the markers which you can recognize. Let's quickly see some of those stages. So basically, coming from the ego development theory, these are the identified and distinguished kind of one from another stages. These are different names for them. I hope you can see from the back rows. Different names because different scholars use kind of different metaphorical or scientific names. I'll not go into very detail, but this first block is called the conventional stages. And everything starts, okay, there is one more which I didn't put for really, really young children, which is impulsive. Then what you really can bump into when dealing with adults, the first or the earlier stage is self-centric or egocentric or opportunist, when only my needs and my wishes are concerned and everyone else is just to serve my needs. And then the next stage where people develop is group-centric or diplomat, which is usually when a person basically derives their sense of self and sense of identity from the group to which they belong. So that's why it is diplomat. It's very important to comply and to be within the boundaries and within the moral norms of that group. Statistically, this is the most populated stage of development in the world. Basically, more than 1/3 of all people who were tested through different instruments are at this stage. So this stage, otherwise we can call it ethnocentric, when it is very important to which group I belong. For example, starting from the family, the community, the nation, the religious community, and so on and so forth. So basically, and it is very important to comply. For example, at this stage, people think, what will people tell? If a person dresses up in the morning, so the first thing is not what is appropriate or what is more or less okay and what is comfortable for me, but what people will think about the way I'm dressed, So it's the very important factor here is guilt and shame as instruments. That's very, very, powerful. So I'll not stop long enough. Another one, when a person usually grows up, the sense of unique identity, usually that happens based on some professional, some skill, or some expertise. That's why the level is called skill-centric or an expert. So basically the whole sense of self derives from that expertise. Basically the expertise derives the sense of self. I've met some of the teachers actually at this stage when how you can recognize when you speak with a person and you try to give a feedback or at least discuss, debate some issue that is coming from that person's field of expertise. And then you see the block, basically. Okay, I'm an expert here, you're not, so I don't give a thing about what you think about it. You don't have any right to give me a feedback or to debate this topic. I'm a better expert. So basically at this stage, there is a belief that there are right and wrong answers, basically. And if I'm a good expert, I have to come up with the right answers. It's still slightly black and white thinking. And those who manage to develop further come to this self-determining, or symbolic name is achiever. This is already a more colorful stage, bringing the kind of the third dimension, not only black and white, but also some different colors. Things can be negotiated here, compromises can be found. For example, win-win as a concept becomes first available at this level of consciousness. So these first earlier kind of 4 stages are called conventional stages, because wherever a person is, kind of how to put it, they're in some conventional system which they're not necessarily aware of and serving. And even if someone, for example, president of a large corporation, at this stage, the person can think that already I'm ruling the world kind of, but the conventional system is still basically setting the rules, you know, and setting the norms. So, yeah. So I'm just thinking when my wife is leaving the room, that is it a signal? It's okay. So those few people who manage to develop through this little kind of gap, which I put deliberately here between conventional and post-conventional stages, reach the level of individualist or pluralist, or like very many different ways. Each of them is transferring some message. So self-questioning, because at this stage the person is starting to ask questions about who I am and what is the meaning. And the main question is why? What's the meaning of all that? Why should I continue doing what I've been doing for years, and so on? So basically, a lot of people who are entering this stage, which can be very painful, become not that convenient, especially in business organizations, when you have to, you have to believe the mission, you have to go and deliver result, and then you start asking questions. This is a very interesting stage. Why individualist? Because a person is usually starting to go deep into the inner life, kind of inner world, asking very much inner questions. Up to this stage, the inner world is something conceptually understandable, but not something important in life. Why pluralist? Because all the opinions become interesting, very, very important. It becomes very important to put things into context. And sometimes people can get lost into this contextual and what you can really see in the postmodern culture. So everything is contextual. There is no one truth. All truths are equal. So it's a bit a dangerous topic. I'm afraid to get started, in discussing this. What usually happens, even fewer people, when they go to the next stage, which is called strategist, this level of consciousness is really complex. So at this stage, really systemic thinking becomes available, meaning that a person can think systems into systems into systems. Like a person is a system within systems, and the relationships between those systems become really important. So, for example, when executive search companies are looking for top executives in large corporations, they're usually searching at least people preferably at this stage, because then the really difficult and complex transformations become possible in terms of mind complexity. Of course, horizontal skills are also needed. So, of course, those people have to have education and tools and so on. But the mind complexity is something you cannot really go into training or go into an MBA program and get. So, okay, then basically probably just very few percent of, it's according to different scholars, the percentage is different, but like a few, like 1 or 2% people develop to the next stage, which is called the alchemist or construct aware. Why? Because those people become automatically aware of all the constructs we built, and basically everything that all our tools of meaning making, including our language, including a lot of theories, a lot of model, this model itself, and the whole psychology is a construct. They're needed, but we have to be aware of, because they kind of create a lot of conditioning, and those people can be really here and now and act very, very powerfully from the moment, understanding very broad context. And that last, or at least up to now, the latest stage, which is identified but not really scientifically researched yet by those scientists, is called unitive or an ironist. Basically, the simple way to when you have to explain something which is like quite far away, you have to quote people. So the best version of explanation of this stage I've heard was when the state of waking up is stabilized and those people are carrying this awakened mind and awakened consciousness in life. So basically we can witness them in awakened spiritual teachers and really, really bright, realized people. Yeah. So this is a very, very quick and dirty excursion through those interesting stages. Each of them contains a lot of different colors and qualities. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to go deep enough. I'll also show another picture, which is telling pretty much the same, but in a bit different terminology. So Robert Keegan, with his subject-object theory, created explained 5 stages. Why 5? Because he took it a bit more roughly. Like he was focused on different qualities. Not different qualities, but specific qualities that bring those wider or broader stages. So here they are 3. Like first 2, we don't go into them because usually when we deal with adults, we usually face people starting from the stage 3 socialized mind. So basically, its symbolic name is a faithful follower. So basically, at this stage, a person doesn't have their own independent sense of self. So sense of self is deriving from the norms of the group, of the community. Again, as I was telling about the diplomat, it's very important what my group thinks, what are the moral norms, standards, and the most important thing is to follow. Statistically, around 65% are up to this stage and including this. So basically more than half of the population. And this statistic is coming from the Western world. Unfortunately, I have to say that in Ukraine, the level, the center of gravity is even a little bit kind of at earlier stages. So statistics in Ukraine, and I'm now referring to my good friend Valery Pekar, those locals you some of you may know, who is studying spiral dynamics, another developmental framework, and even wrote a beautiful book about it. So according to his opinion, more than 75% of the population in Ukraine are staying like at this. I'll try to be careful at this stage. What does it mean? It means that what is happening in the society, in the community, starting from the family, is really determining how people are perceiving themselves and how they form their opinions. So the next stage is self-authoring minds, when a person already acquires independent sense of self. Okay, I'm independent. Here, the most important thing is my relationships and mutuality within my group. Here, I'm independent. I can observe and be aware of those relationships as an object of my awareness. And it's very important to form an identity and ideology. Okay, this is my opinion. This is your opinion. We can debate. Everything is negotiable here. So it's very important that at this stage a person gets inner direction and inner goals. Okay, independent of the goals of my group. And stage 5, which is basically something between strategist and alchemist in the previous framework, is self-transforming mind or interconnected mind. When a person can become called different identities, multiple identities at the same time, and they're changing, they're evolving on the go, basically, in the flow. When a person is interacting with someone or something. Very kind of very multiple perspectives can be taken at the same time. Another picture how to symbolize it, why this theory is called subject-object theory, because Robert Gigan explained that the way this development is happening, when a subject of one level becomes an object of the subject of another level, and so on. So basically, at the socialized mind, the subject is we, us, all our relationships, our mutuality. And then in self-authoring mind, okay, that becomes an object of a person's awareness, okay? And then in the self-transforming mind, multiple identities and multiple systems of relationships becomes an object of awareness and something we can deal with. Yeah, unless it becomes our object of our awareness and of our kind of control, we cannot do much about it. So let me see. I still have an ambition to leave few minutes for our discussion or maybe questions and answers. So I'll try to check if. If there's something more to add. Okay, so basically coming back to our topic, why is this important? Yeah, because when we are upbringing children, they go through those beautiful cognitive development stages defined by Jean Piaget. What's different? Why do you think, by the way, why do you think this is important? Adult development or adult growing up is important in the context of children development. Any ideas? Okay, like an environment where they are growing. Yes, exactly, because it's very important in what level of maturity, what level of maturity those children are facing in their lives. And there is a beautiful concept. The same scholars have this like jargon. They call it a free ride. Basically, they tell that if a child grows up in a family which is at a certain level of maturity, or not only a family, usually the most important is a family, the educational environment, the relatives, basically the community. But if, let's say, center of gravity of that environment is at a certain level, so they by adult age, those children get a free ride. So basically this development happens quicker and a bit easier. So basically the main idea of my presentation is that we have to be aware of this factor and to take responsibility for our own growing up and our own maturity in order to create a better kind of starting position and better launch pad for our children. Another metaphor is like an elevator. So basically, so we can give that few floors up for our children by becoming adults ourselves. So I want to quickly illustrate it with one little story of one very nice guy from Sweden who is called Alex. So yeah, my wife came back. So both of us, we were at the workshop of Bill Torbert, one of those scholars, developmental psychologist, and we met Alex in 2016 when he was 22. By the way, here is Alex. He's on the right for you in this picture. So back then he was 22. So we were in this workshop, quite intense, and we did some exercise, and kind of we met this guy and spent some time debating some topic which was given to us, and both of us, me and Katya, we were so surprised, like, how old are you? And Alex said 22. So basically we were talking to the guy who was basically speaking the way, not what he was saying, but the way he was thinking, the way he was taking perspectives and seeing things from different eyes. For us, it was like more like 40 or 50 years old, very mature person. Speaking through this, he was already at post-conventional stage of development, being 22. That's so impressive. We were so impressed, and we of course stayed friends. And then we found out afterwards that Alex is the son of Thomas Bjorkman, very famous, beautiful human being who is a social entrepreneur, applied philosopher. He's an author of a book, co-author of a book, The Nordic Secret, which is explaining the way the Scandinavian countries came to the level of welfare and basically social justice and everything else nice, which basically happened through adult development. Starting from the second half of the 19th century, some of the very mature leaders over there decided to create retreat centers all over the place in all Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. And basically adult people were going for like 4, 5, 6, 7 month programs and got really high quality education there. And that was one of the key game changers, basically. So of course that quite well explains why Alex was, not yet, why Alex was so mature at his 22 back then. Now he's 26. By the way, he's now involved in many social projects together with his father, and not doing that because he's a son and he's a privilege, but because he's contributing. He's doing a lot. He's developing co-living spaces. You know, we all know what is co-working spaces, but over there in Scandinavia and in Germany, they're developing co-living spaces. Very interesting concept of little communities when they live together and develop together and engage in different social and developmental activities together. So this is just a quick illustration. Let me see once again. So with this, let me summarize quickly, and we'll have about 10 minutes for discussion. Once again, why is it important? Because when we become aware of the adult development and of the factor of growing up ourselves and becoming more mature, in this sense become wise, we create much better conditions for our children and much better starting position for our children. They can approach their life complexity and the whole VUCA world. I believe you probably heard the concept WUKA world, the complex and totally unpredictable life. We need to give our children that better kind of starting position and better mind complexity. Not that they, if they are lucky enough, they climb to that mind complexity by their 40s or 50s, but preferably start defining themselves and seeing their own role in life much earlier. And of course, as a result, the more mature adults there are, the more mature and healthy developmental spaces they create, such as democratic and alternative schools, needless to mention. Through my practice, I've been dealing with probably around 15 leaders of different private schools, most of them alternative schools here in Ukraine, and I'm really happy to see that those projects are coming from quite a mature level of consciousness, and I'm happy that those spaces are created. So if we are lucky enough not to destroy all the habitat, by the time those children will reach their adulthood, they will have at least a much better chance to come up with more systemic and more complex solutions to the problems we all face. So I'll conclude with some of my favorite quotes. One of them is again by Robert Keegan and Lisa Leahy from very famous book Immunity to Change. So I'll read for those who don't see it from the back. When we experience the world as too complex, we are not just experiencing the complexity of the world. We are experiencing a mismatch between the world complexity and our own at this moment. Yeah? So logically, there are only two ways to mend this mismatch: reduce the world's complexity or increase our own. So you can choose. Good luck with the first part. I prefer the second part, and I see it more realistic. Another one, it's attributed to Oscar Wilde. With age comes wisdom, but sometimes age comes alone. So I very much wish that age comes not alone. And mainly because children follow our example. They see who they deal with, and they can start seeing the world through many different perspectives that they see in the adults around them. So that's pretty much it. We still have a few minutes if you have questions.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Can you please state Alex's brother's name?
Alex Björkman. His father is Thomas Björkman. Thomas Björkman. I think it's this way. He's a very interesting. By the way, I suggest you find his recent TEDx talk in TEDx Berlin from last year. Very beautiful talk, exactly about this subject, how Scandinavian countries made that breakthrough. Yes. Okay. So the question was how a teacher can influence a child if a parent doesn't. Cool. So if there's a mismatch between the family, that's a really cool question. The quick answer very much depends on what role does a teacher play in the as we see, unfortunately, many examples, and as you see many examples, so many of the parents, they just outsource upbringing of their children. So to pay money to get rid of that headache, In this sense, there can be a positive side effect of that stupid situation if a teacher is influential enough in the life of that child. It can have very positive impact. It depends on there are so many angles, and I'm a bit afraid to get stuck in this question. Do the parents block that or not? So, sorry for being very rude, but I'll just make it black and white. If the parents are stupid enough not to get into and not to mess up with the beautiful kind of spiral which more healthy kind of educational environment is creating, it's okay. The basic rule is that, for example, in businesses, that the level of development of the whole organization is blocked by the CEO or first person of few of the first persons, basically. So they are the ceiling. They do not allow the whole system to grow up. The same applies here. The question is who are more influential. And I have seen some examples when children grow up in more healthy environmental environments, schools, than they have in families. So, yeah.
In different life situations, we are playing on different levels.
Yes.
So,
Mhm.
as an idea, maybe we should build schools in that way that this some levels which we want to achieve is usable exactly in this situation in this.
Sorry.
Oh, so different situations in life force us to use different levels of wisdom. So maybe we should build schools to push children to some level, not only by our example, but with situation.
Yeah, thank you for this. Yeah, there's always problems with pulling and pushing. You are absolutely right with the comment that in different contexts and in different areas of life we can behave from different stages, and this is healthy. This is normal. Sometimes we need to act and behave from more like simple action logics, and sometimes we have to turn on the broad multi-perspective view. That is correct, and that is one of the many principles that, because of the limited time, I cannot go through. When it comes to pushing or pulling, it's a bit dangerous because a vertical development is happening. It must be happening very organically. So when the healthy development is when the principle of transcend and include is happening. So the new stage transcends and includes the previous stage. So the previous stage and all its capabilities become available and remain available. So basically a person can access all those more primitive tools, so to say. Sometimes when you push or pull, there can be some unhealthy aspects of development, and they turn out to be either allergies or addictions. So allergies towards some previous stages. For example, when a person develops into the individualist, very much focus goes on to relationships, harmony, and meanings, and the previous stages of like the values of the previous stage, like achievement, goal setting, objective ways of measuring things, KPIs and so on, some people become allergic to this. So this is already an unhealthy aspect of development.
Okay, but it's true. But then a family with high level of wisdom can be also problem for children. It can also provoke
It's again, it depends on how they express and how they realize their higher level of wisdom. Because if they are aware of those stages, how the child develops, and they're not really pushy or trying to pull like a, opening the wine bottle, um, then in the healthy circumstances, the child will go through the stages naturally, because this is basically programmed through nature. This is a growth hierarchy. This is not a dominance hierarchy. So basically, we develop. But what they create in normal circumstances, they create that space. Otherwise, if they are at earlier stages, they act like a ceiling for a child. So basically, a child just stops somewhere. Exactly, to create as much space as possible. Yeah. Yes, Sophie. Can we have a mic? Yeah.
How do you grow the highest level of wisdom in yourself, like the unit of one?
That's another $1 million question. So I don't like focusing on myself in this sense. I've been going through a lot of challenges, and a lot of times in my life I've been either pushed out of my zone of comfort, or I've been pushing out myself. So one of the most universal ways to support this vertical development and growing up basically is going out of comfort zone, basically, because then you create complexity which you cannot really deal with, or you cannot really understand, and you just have to upgrade yourself, and then you go and you expand your horizontal kind of skills, capacity, understanding, and at some point you understand that you already see things differently and you make sense differently. Other than that, those universal kind of ways to support your vertical development is all the contemplative, meditative, and spiritual practices in general. Then emotional development plays very, very important role, like EQ as a separate line of intelligence, because when you develop your emotional awareness, you are necessarily kind of try to take different perspectives. So basically, this multi-perspective thinking. Multicultural kind of environment and interaction is important, because then you see things through different eyes, through different cultures. You just understand that there are different ways to see the same things. Any creative activity expands. Another way is studying different psychoactive theories and models, and evolutionary theory itself is quite psychoactive. When you study it, when you try to apply it, it also expands your mind. Then shadow work. I don't know how many of you have come across the concept of shadow as a psychological cleaning up, like cleaning our shadow material, basically facing our demons. Usually we do it with the help of professional kind of psychologists, therapists. There are different ways to do it ourselves, and these kind of practices.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
You're saying that in order to grow yourself, you had to find yourself outside your comfort zone, and you had to develop to grow. And then the growth was organic, more or less. But is that possible to establish that at school? Can we establish such conditions for children, but then we push or pull them, depending on how tough those conditions are at schools? How honest is that with respect to the child?
Who don't have the headsets, if we create those conditions, not everyone have their headsets. If we create those conditions in schools, aren't we pushing them? There's a thin line. It depends on how much you need some knowledge of developmental theory to see if you create those pushing conditions, what does it mean, like metaphorically? If we basically that evolution, that development can be traumatic in terms of like in psychological sense, you know. So it takes some knowledge. And all the development is one way or another traumatic, you know? So it's a big discussion. Usually you have to create as much space for development to create that field of development without too much push or pull, really approaching individually, really being sensitive to the stages of development where those children are. So it's not a simple question, but a very good one. Thanks. I don't know if we still have time.
Just to give it another name, if possible, in democratic education, we call it to facilitate.
Exactly.
Not to
Yeah.
pull, not to push, but
Exactly. That's a very good. Yeah, that's a very good way to frame it. Yeah. So we not pushing or pulling, but facilitating. So basically, it's. Thank you for this. So thank you very much.